we can get started. So again, everyone, thank you so much for joining me this morning. This presentation really is about Stanford Domains, but more specifically, it's about how to support folks that you're already supporting and helping them get online with Stanford Domains. So I'm Caitlin Kraft again. I work with the Vice Provost for Graduate Education, and we primarily serve graduate students across all 7 schools. So a lot of what I do is empowering them with various technologies to be able to do whatever they're trying to do in their graduate studies here at Stanford. And a piece of that is helping them create an effective web presence. So whether it's for them, they're about to enter the job market and they're looking for a space to be able to create that website for their web presence for the job market, or they're currently in their studies at Stanford and they're looking to be able to create some sort of web presence for maybe a project or a group that they're a part of. So this is something that's kind of been running across my path for about 3 years, supporting folks in these various projects. So the tool that I've really chosen to kind of push to them since about 2017 has been Stanford Domains. So today I'm really going to spend my time with you all kind of explaining how I train those folks to be able to use Stanford Domains effectively. So those of you who are pretty technically inclined, some of this might be knowledge that you already have, but I'm hoping it'll still be helpful for you to see how that I am teaching those folks that aren't technically inclined, and you can even take this deck and run with it when you're working with those folks. And the second part of today's presentation will be a live demo. So I'll actually get into Stanford Domains and click through setting it up and using the Installatron install wizard to be able to stand up a WordPress website in just a few moments. But to go over the agenda, we're going to start with what is Stanford Domains, and this whole idea, if you build something well and put it out there, it's kind of a set it and forget it implementation. That's one of the reasons why I love Stanford Domains, and I think it's been so successful with the various audiences that it served. And then again, once you put it out there, you've got to be able to have the resources that folks can take it and run with it. So I'll explain a bit more about how I teach it specifically and the resources that I use, and then how to support it. So with this ability to be able to put something out there and let it run and let people run with it, you've got to be able to have a good support network with within a document-driven approach, and I'll show you what that means. And then we'll go through and we'll actually demo it live and click through, like I said, and have an actual WordPress installation happen. So to get started, let's talk about what Stanford Domains is. So it's an offering. Let me move this out of the way. So it's an offering through the Center for Teaching and Learning, formerly VPTL, and formerly before that CTL, that offers the opportunity to register a free subdomain of su.domains and create a digital presence through various mediums such as WordPress. There's about 100 different bundles of installs that you could choose. WordPress is typically what I recommend for folks who are using Stanford Domains. So this includes full cPanel access to, like I said, over 100 open source applications, unlimited subdomains, unlimited FTP, email, databases, and more. So this is basically, if you were piecing together a plan through GoDaddy, it could end up being, upwards of $100 a month. And as long as you have an active Stanford SUNET login, you can access all of this for free. So what's under the hood? Again, like I said, this is an offering by Stanford Center for Teaching and Learning. And the reason, to give a little bit of context of why they're the ones that own this offering, is because it's really a powerful tool for portfolios. And so there's a lot of background about how the portfolio approach is more specific and different than if you're just creating a website and what the purposes are for that. So it's really for a portfolio. Again, this is why it's a tool of choice for us as we're supporting graduate students in they're creating their portfolio to prepare as they enter the job market. But it's flexible enough to be able to create a web presence or websites for other uses as well. You can see the graphic that I have that has Wikimedia, WordPress, Drupal, and beyond. These are all different applications that you can install on Stanford Domains, including just a straight up HTML, because again, basically you have file space. Underneath the hood specifically is Reclaim Hosting. So basically, they provide a white label solution for universities to be able to have this hosting power. So if you can imagine GoDaddy that was specifically education focused, that's what Reclaim Hosting is. And that's how we have the dazzling ability to be able to provide this service to our Stanford community. So University of Mary Washington really was a pioneer in this space. So they were the ones that kind of jumped on and worked sideline with Reclaim Hosting to formalize this hosting platform. And it's really baked into their culture there and has been for years. So you can see I've got this little graphic of Domainosaur. So it's really pushing that every single student that is there is empowered and has the tools and knowledge necessary to be able to create their own web presence. So they have that while they're there and as they leave. So I'm going to spend a bit of time right now explaining specifically how I teach this to other folks. Again, typically I'm teaching this to folks who either are a little bit tech savvy or really just have never done anything in this space at all. And again, even if this is something that you feel very comfortable with, I think it's helpful to understand how it's been effectively taught to people who aren't as tech savvy as you. So I start out by explaining some just basic vocabulary. So the best way that I explain a web host is that this is where you live online. You're landlord, and most everyone rents. So in the example of Stanford Domains, this is our web host that we're using, where we actually have our content. And then I have the official definition there as well. And then I explain the domain. So this is a subdivision of the internet consisting of computers or sites, usually with a common purpose, or this is you giving everyone directions to where you live online. And the example I have here is palmdrive.com. And again, everybody who signs up for Stanford Domains automatically gets one free subdomain of su.domains, or su.stanford, sorry. And then the control panel. This is one of the things, again, there's so many different options across campus if you're trying to stand up a website. And this is, in my opinion, what makes Stanford Domains unique in the Stanford space is that you actually have Cpanel Control. So the best way to explain this is that the landlord just gives you permission to change whatever you want. So the Cpanel is an online Linux-based web hosting control panel that provides a graphical interface and automation tools designed to simplify the process of hosting a website. So when I do the demo today, you'll see that that Cpanel, and it's customized. So every university who uses Reclaim Hosting, again, ours is labeled Stanford Domains, has the ability to customize a bit of that and what things are there. So I'll show you, I'll click around as we go through that demo as well. And again, the subdomain, you've heard me mention that a few times. So in the DNS hierarchy, a subdomain is a domain that's part of a main domain. So in our case of VPGE, our subdomain of Stanford is vpge.stanford.edu. And then this is kind of a tricky space across campus. So I think that we might get some questions here. I typically do when I give this presentation. But just to give a high level understanding of how virtual or vanity URLs work at Stanford is that if you are a Stanford Department Research Group or university recognized student organization, you are eligible to go through the process to ask for a virtual host or a vanity URL. And that would be my group name.stanford.edu. So this is something that's of particular interest of some of the population that I work with because they are student groups. While not all of them are university recognized student groups, some of them are. So helping them through that process to put the tickets in and ask for that. And there's, of course, UIT has information online how to do that. And then SAL has information if you are a student group, how to go about that. For the most part, everyone I support really is doing, they already have they're working with their own domain name. Whether it's a group that already bought their own or it's an individual student who's working on their portfolio. So it's really just them going into where they bought their domain name and pointing those DNS settings, the name servers to Reclaim Hosting. And I'll do that as part of the demo as well. And then I like to explain what a content management system is. So again, for folks that typically haven't been involved with the web development space, I try to explain the difference between how we typically used to build websites, which was individual HTML pages. And if you had 10 different pages on your website and you wanted to change your footer, you'd have to go to 10 different files and update that footer. But the magical part of a CMS is that you're utilizing a database, so you can have content in one block that is shared across multiple places, so that you're able to really in an efficient way build and manage a website. So the CMS that I typically recommend for these types of audiences is WordPress, which is a free and open source content management system based in PHP and MySQL. So there's a lot of user support on this. The ability for somebody with zero web experience to jump into WordPress and to be able to stand something up fairly quickly is much higher than other CMSs that I've seen. So, and again, that there's just so much documentation. One of the things I'll show too is LinkedIn Learning, formerly lynda.com, has amazing videos for WordPress. And I have a Canvas course that I'll share with you all that you all can join as well, that I've gone through and I've kind of cherry picked out a few of my favorite WordPress how-to videos too that are really helpful either for yourself or to share with others. And within WordPress, there is the plugin architecture. So basically, this is how I explain to folks that this is how you extend features and functionality through your website. So if it's something more than just text on a page, you want an action to happen, then it's probably going to happen through some form or fashion of a plugin. And so this is something typically when I have a workshop with folks and I'll do an hour of this, and then we have to spend an hour sitting together, standing up their website for the first time. It's a lot of time spent on thinking about what plugins make the most sense. And in just a moment, I'll actually show you a worksheet that helps facilitate that thinking and is really good on the curriculum side of trying to support folks in this space. And then I go through the theme. And so talking about how themes allow you to change the look and somewhat functionality of a WordPress website without altering the core code or the site content. And this is one of the spots where I really tried to emphasize to folks that not to make your content fit this theme. So really have a good, clear understanding of what the purpose of your website is, and that kind of curriculum form that I mentioned earlier really helps them focus on that first, and then worrying about the theme later. So again, thinking about this approach, know what your audience is, your purpose, think content first, design later, and then create a content map to connect your group's goals or your individual's goals with the relevant content outputs. So what that looks like is this. And again, I have this available to download in that Canvas instance that I can invite you all to. So you're thinking of 3 tiers here. So the overarching goals of your web presence. And then you're thinking about, okay, well, what does that actually look like in functionality? And then you're tying that to specific plugins. So a lot of our folks are trying to foster community. So if you're trying to foster community, you might want to share some events. You might want to have a forum. You might want to have like your Twitter feed showing. So once you have them build all of this out, then you can help them fill in what plugins make the most sense, or help them understand how to effectively search for WordPress plugins to make sure that there's it's vetted well, it works with your current version of WordPress. There's a lot of people that say this is a good plugin and it was recently updated, all of those good things. And I also try to remind folks that building a website, be it in Stanford Domains or elsewhere, isn't always the right communication channel for everything. So I remind folks that there is Slack, there is Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. All of these social media tools are forms of communication that you can use amongst your groups, or if you're putting information out there about yourself, to create a profile and that sort of thing. But there's also mailing lists. Again, if your whole purpose is really just to communicate specifically with a certain group of people, you might consider using the mailing list at Stanford Listserv, or even Google Groups. And then support it. So before we go into support it, let me just check in. Claire, are there any questions that have come up yet?
No, not that I can see.
Okay, cool. Let me see. Cool. Thank you. Go back to support it. All right, so I'll put a link in the chat in just a bit about where all of you can self-enroll into this course that I have in Canvas, and it's got a handful of things, including the slides that I've got today, along with different handouts that if you're teaching this to folks or supporting folks, that you can use those handouts as well, and then a handful of external links. Including Reclaim Hosting's own documentation, some of the biggest high value items there, and then videos from LinkedIn Learning. So one of the things I really like about Reclaim Hosting's documentation is that it's incredibly searchable. So you really can just pick like a keyword, and it's constantly vetted, up to date, and very easy to navigate. And you can actually access this documentation very easily from the Stanford Domains dashboard, and I'll show that when I do the demo. And again, here's a little screenshot of LinkedIn Learning videos. So I've got a handful of these picked out and that are in the Canvas instance. Great. So we're going to spend a little bit of time now going through a demo. So let me stop my share and I will reset it. And we can actually pause for a second. Does anybody have any questions so far about the slide deck? We can put them in chat.
Yeah, you can put them in chat, or if you raise your hand, I can unmute you as well.
Oh yeah.
Whatever works for people.
And while we're waiting really fast, let me just give the link to anybody who wants to join the Canvas course.
I do have a question from Rachel. She's wondering, will it be available later? She's a pretty obvious question, but still.
So Rachel, when you say when, oh yes, yeah, everything's recorded. Yep. So
oh,
you can
okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So you can hop out, Rachel, and check out another one, and all of these are recorded, right, Claire?
Yes, they are.
Cool.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, and then the Canvas course actually has a video of the demo that I've already done before too, so you're not missing out. Great. And then that's the self-enroll link. And this is actually, I know this isn't about Canvas, but it's a really cool thing. If you ever build anything out in Canvas, you can go through and do a setting and turn on self-enroll, so you can give people a link and then they can actually join the course themselves versus you having to add them. So it's a pretty cool little thing with Canvas. All right, so let me go and share my screen for the demo. Cool. All right. So once you hit domains.stanford.edu and complete the interest form, this is basically the first step is going to ask you a few things, including like, what do you want your primary domain to be, which is caitlin.sue.domains. And that's not to say that's the only domain you're ever going to use, but you need to start with something, and they consider that your primary domain. I actually typically have multiple domains, and just for today's purpose, I purchased like a little test domain that we can play with today. But let me scroll through what the dashboard looks like. So you can see at the top, we've got applications. So these are some of the most frequently installed applications, so you can see them right here. But if you actually go to all applications, this is the Installatron mini web host, including GoDaddy. Use this. It's a one-click, easy way to install a bundle of code. So we're going to scroll down to apps for content management, and WordPress and Drupal are the two most popular, but you can see that there's a bunch. And then e-commerce and business, photos, files, survey statistics, and then MISC. So there's a lot in here. And then I was on the, on the Drupal Listserv yesterday, somebody was asking about this one in particular. So this is one that you can install. I think Moodle's on here as well. So there's I think specifically for our audiences, there are probably some folks that are interested in learning management systems specifically. And those are all available in there as well. So we'll go back to the dashboard. So you can see we've got the domain management all set up here, file management, email, all of this is unlimited. That's why you can see the infinity signs over here. Databases, all unlimited. security, this Let's Encrypt SSL is really nice. So basically, it provides you the HTTPS certificate and encryption. Typically, if you're going through a separate web host and you were setting this up, it's an extra cost. And Reclaim Hosting or Stanford Domains utilizes this Let's Encrypt, which is totally free of cost. And it really is just an extra click to, once you install a website, to go ahead and click and go through this, and it installs the certificates for you. So that's really nice. And then you've got a bunch of other kind of advanced features that probably most folks aren't going to use. But again, it's helpful for those folks who are really looking to have full cPanel control. And let's go through and actually install a WordPress instance. So before we do that, we need to make sure that we have a domain to put it on. So I'm going to go ahead and add, I bought yesterday, I noticed that there was onion.fun. So I noticed that there was, I can't remember if I bought Funyun or Funyuns, so we'll find out. But there's a fun new domain extension, so I thought we would try that. So I'm going to go ahead. I have this purchased from GoDaddy, and I went to GoDaddy and I pointed my name service over to Stanford Domains. So I can show you that in just a moment too in the documentation, how that works. While that's loading to make sure I didn't typo, let's go here. So this is Reclaim Hosting's support. If you click into support right here, it will take you to Reclaim Hosting. And then if we just type in name servers, for example. So Reclaim Hosting's name service. So this is basically, again, if you buy a domain name somewhere else and you want to point it to your host, which is Stanford Domains, you'll want to find out the name servers of that web host. So Reclaim Hosting's is NS1 and NS2. So you just grab those. Let's see. It might be Funyuns Fun. Funyuns Fun. I have to remember which one I bought. And then that will help you will help the web host recognize that that is the person who owns the name, and allows you to actually add on the domain there. There we go. That's right. Okay. So now we've got this name that I bought at GoDaddy.com, and I've pointed the name servers from GoDaddy to Reclaim Hosting. So now what I can do is I can go back and let's go. You can see that I've got it right there as an add-on domain. I'm going to go back to my dashboard. And I'm going to go and install a new instance of WordPress with Installatron. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, yes, I do want to install this application. And I'm going to pick what domain I want. So I've got Funyuns Fun. So you've got a few different options. Typically I do, because I am going to add the cert here. So I'll go ahead and do the HTTPS. And I'm going to backspace out the directory. So by default, it fills that out. If I were to leave that, it would install my WordPress instance, not specifically here, but at /blog, and I don't want that, so I backspace that out. And then we're presented with a handful of options, most of which are good to leave as default. So leave the recommended version, which should be the most up-to-date version, that you need to accept the license agreement. I have kind of mixed feelings about setting things to automatically update. In theory, this is the best thing to do. A couple things, you want to make sure that you have backups turned on, because if you automatically update, especially plugins, things could break, and you want to be able to roll back to before your site broke because of a plugin update. But in general, I do recommend that you get the latest and greatest. So you can leave those. And then you see the backup that I was talking about here. So it is good to, of course, have automatic backups. It's really nice. Again, everything I always say is easy one click with the Installatron. It is an easy one click to revert your website back to what it was this morning, as long as you have backups turned on. A couple best practices that I have here is that you set your username to an email address. It's really helpful, because then in WordPress, you have to have a username and an email address, and if they're the same, it just makes things a little bit easier. So we've got the email, and then of course, what I'm putting in here is the title. That can change later. and then yes to limit login attempts, and no, you don't want a multi-site. So a multi-site is in WordPress, and they have something kind of similar in Drupal, is that you have, it's basically what the Stanford Web Services stack is that you have one big site that has lots of sites underneath it that all have basically the same permissions, that they all have these sets of plugins they can choose from, they all have these settings, that sort of thing. So for most instances, you're not going to need to have a multi-site, so leave that not enabled. And then automatically manage advanced settings. Of course, if you want something specific, you can go through and let me manage those settings. So let me just double check that I've got everything going correctly here. Cool. So I'm going to click install. And then it's processing. It takes a few moments. And you can see that this is kind of where it's happening right here. And this is your dashboard. Like I said, you have unlimited sites that you can have here. So you could have one, or you could have 10 or more, and they have amazing resources and uptime. Again, all of this on the back end is actually Reclaim hosting, and you can check them out separately. Individuals can actually buy their own hosting account through Reclaim hosting. So let's take a look at our new WordPress website. So you could see, I mean, I slowed down because I was walking through everything, but how quickly you can have a domain name that didn't have anything behind it, point it to Stanford Domains, and then go through the installatron, and you've got your brand new shiny website. And then let's go through, let me click to my notes just for a second. I'll pause, and if anybody has any questions while I pause, I just want to make sure I'm getting all of my notes for the demo.
If you have a question, you can put it in chat or raise your hand. Actually, I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you install Drupal, I guess what version would that be in? Is that through Drupal.org in general, or?
Yeah, we can actually click through it. So it'd be very similar to what we just saw with WordPress. They basically have the bundle of source code, just if you were to go through Drupal and to download it yourself and install it on WebSpace. The nice thing about Installatron, Installatron isn't really specific to Stanford Domains. A lot of folks use it, a lot of web hosts use it, including like GoDaddy. So it's like file repositories that are constantly kept up to date. The only differences that you would see is that Reclaim can, when I went through those settings of like, yes, enable, no, that sort of thing, they can control that. But for the most part, everything that I've seen, folks use very similar settings.
Okay, great.
That's a good question. Let's just kind of click through that for a second. We can see. So I'm going to go ahead and so one of the things you could let me just go through let me share my screen first. And then
I have another question when we're done.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. All right. So the nice thing too, again, with this is that everything is really easy to, like, this dashboard is really easy to understand. So what I'm going to do right now is I actually want to get rid of the Funyun site because we can look at Drupal. So I'm going to uninstall. And then, so everything is in this dashboard the same. So even if we have, and you can see backups over here, even if we have various content management systems installed, everything will be in that My Applications list. So let's see what Drupal looks like. All right. So same kind of thing. They're asking for, do you want to have a directory? No, I don't, but let me make sure I do Funyuns. Okay. Very similar. So so they are installing Drupal 8 by default, 8.8.4. So I don't think I've ever seen it where they do something that's lesser than the latest and greatest.
Yeah.
But you have the control to go further back because
wow.
Yeah, like really, how far back can you go? Yeah. And then going through again, basic settings, administrator stuff. Yeah. So it's a little bit, there's actually less, it looks like a few less settings than WordPress. Let me go through here. All right, that's fine. Install, cool. And Claire, while it's installing, what was your other question?
The other question is from Bryce. Is stanford.edu / the ~sunet, is that no longer being used? Do you know?
I want to say that I think that's part of the no longer provisioning for, I don't think they're like AFS, they're no longer provisioning AFS stuff unless you have a compelling reason. I think that's in the same vein, I think. Like, I think mine is still active, but I don't know if you can still request to have that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I know that if you use sites, if you're doing Drupal and you're using sites, you can have your own space, but it's totally different from that.
Yeah, and a lot of the folks that I'm supporting, I mean, again, I get that there's a little bit of a unique use case with the folks that I'm supporting, but they're really creating portfolios. So a lot of them want to have their own name. So it's kind of like they're getting introduced to being able to create a website. And like I said, this is all behind Stanford WebAuth. So once you no longer have WebAuth, you don't have access to get into Stanford Domains any longer. But the nice thing is, I haven't done this with Drupal, but again, I mainly push WordPress for the folks that I support. There's a plugin that makes it incredibly easy to bundle up your website and take it somewhere else that has an installatron. So I've walked a handful of our folks through that before, that they're preparing to complete their degree work. So they're wanting to go to their own web host, and it really is just a one click to export and then go to their new web host and import. So it's kind of like, that's one of the things I would be mindful of with folks too, when if you are recommending Stanford Domains as a tool to have a kind of an exit plan. All right, so let me go to, yep. So there's our brand new shiny Drupal site. And again, you could do this with Moodle or any of the other applications. And one thing I'll say too is that, so we do have a Stanford branded theme that's available that is, I think it's Lagunita. It's still very WordPress friendly. It hasn't been updated in a little while. I want to say JB from UCOM is working on an update to that, but we don't have it yet. But it is a lightly branded Stanford theme that if you're a student group or one of the other affiliates that is allowed to use a lightly branded Stanford theme, I have that available in the canvas as well. And it's a WordPress theme, really easy to install and attach to your site. So I've gone through most of the demo that I was planning to show. Let me stop sharing my screen and see if anybody wants to see anything else. What questions do folks have? We still have about 10 minutes. Or anything that anybody wants to see?
I have another question.
Yeah.
So I know AFS is eventually going away, but this sounds like it could really work well as a replacement of some kind. Have you guys talked about that, or is that something?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting. I don't know if that would be like big picture the biggest thing, because it's really meant to be a portfolio tool, and right now it lives in CTL. So I think it would just be. I think it'd have to be conversations between folks, because I'm not affiliated with CTL either. I mean, they're my buddies, but it's really just been, I've been evangelizing this tool since they've had it on campus, and it's just been so helpful with many of the folks that I support. But yeah, I mean, it is very much an open, it is open cPanel, so there's a lot of flexibility in there.
I have a question from Rachel. Was this your original role, or did you kind of get into it by default? I.e., you kept having to be the tech person, so you finally just did it full time.
Oh, yeah. So this is like, this kind of portfolio area is a pretty small piece of what I do. So at VPGE, I'm the Director of Technology and Communications. And so I've been there about 6 years, and I want to say we were close to around 10 people, a little bit over 10 people. When I started, we're one of the newer groups on campus. And now we're at, I think I've got a coworker in here, now we're at 25 or so. We're I feel getting closer to 30, especially we have graduate students who help us and that sort of thing that I would include in that count. I really kind of took those two portfolio areas of technology and communication, and yeah, so it's an interesting role, and this is a really cool, exciting part of what I get to do.
Cool.
Anything else that anybody would like to see in the dashboard at all?
I have a quick. So I had a faculty member that needed a website moved over from somewhere else, obviously.
Yeah.
So they can't anyway. So we at Earth use sites for all of our labs, and so when I created her site, I made it on sites, but then she had a URL that she wanted to move over, and I'm just wondering. I was just trying to figure out if this would be a good way to pull over her her URL that she'd been paying for and redirect it to the Stanford Domains or something. But I'm not sure. Anyway, then on Stanford, I went out and got a vanity URL for her for Stanford, and so I just wonder if you can point the old one over here through your tool.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I haven't run into this myself, but I want to say I've heard kind of both sides, and I probably should just test it myself. But I've heard that yes, they were able to, and no, they were not able to take a vanity URL and the Stanford vanity URL and make that connection to Stanford Domains. You could definitely do that with a redirect, but that doesn't mean that it's going to show up in the like the masking in the URL but technically let me share a link right here, the virtual host info. So I want to say it's like if you put a ticket in and you talk to the folks who wrangle all of the DNS and name server stuff. So on that page, the link that I just shared, they kind of talk about the eligibility and the control for that. So in general, it's saying your website must be hosted on web.stanford.edu. Virtual URLs for non-web.stanford.edu websites must be handled through the system admin for that server. And then there's some exceptions to the rule. But again, most of the time for these one-off things, folks want to have their own domain name. And if you're paying for your own domain name, 100% you can point it to wherever. You have really good control over that. It's really more of if you've got a Stanford domain name, a subdomain name, and you're wanting to control where that goes. I think that it's more tricky.
Yeah, that makes more sense. That makes more sense, yeah. Does anybody else have questions?
Let me see if there's any other links. I think the most helpful thing, again, is the Canvas link that I shared if you all are interested in learning more. And I do post resources there often. I'll send a message out through the Canvas to folks. And I also, every once in a while, maybe a couple times a year, I do these workshops live with folks. And it's typically 2 hours, an hour of kind of this, and then an hour of I'll have somebody helping me, and we'll actually float around the room everybody actually has that hour dedicated to trying to work on their website and go from there, whether it's that you need help with the theme or just everything in general or just advice. And it's a really fun time to be able to just really set aside that time to build a website.
Very cool.
All right, well, if that's it, I release you all to the next session. And thanks so much, Claire.